Carthage was a great sea power, and Romans had never fought a single battle at sea.
And so the Romans, in order to fight a naval war, had to develop a navy. And they got a break early in this war when they found a Carthaginian warship that had accidentally washed up on the shore of the Italian coast after having been abandoned by its crew during a storm. And they closely studied the Carthaginian vessel. They took it apart, found out how it was built, and then built hundreds of exact replicas of this Carthaginian ship. So the Romans now had a fleet.
New to naval warfare, the Romans had to find a way to turn things to their advantage. They soon found the answer. Instead of bombarding from a distance, Roman soldiers boarded the enemy's ships using a specially designed plank called a corvus. In hand-to-hand combat, Roman legions were just as deadly as on land. It took 23 years of fighting, but the Romans won the First Punic War in 241 BC. Romans seized the rich islands of Sicily and Sardinia and forced the king of Carthage to sign a crushing treaty, giving the empire's entire treasury to Rome. It's said a young boy witnessed his people's humiliation that day. The son of a Carthaginian general looked on, bitterly, vowing revenge. The child's name was Hannibal. 2 decades after Carthage lost the First Punic War, Hannibal was now a soldier, the leader of his nation's military. He was 25 years old and already a great warrior. Fresh from the conquest of Spain, he reminded his troops of his promise to punish Rome.
Year after year you have fought with me and won. Steel your hearts to march forward, to halt only the walls of Rome.
But attacking Rome wouldn't be easy. No longer in control of the Mediterranean, Hannibal would have to make the journey by land, crossing the Alps with 40,000 men and 37 elephants. Autumn, 218 BC. Man and beast trudge for months over cruel terrain. Their serpentine parade stretches more than 15 miles. Hannibal's troops are professional soldiers, well-equipped and well-trained, and yet the long journey takes a grim toll. When they finally make it through the mountains, 1/3 of Hannibal's men are dead. Most of the horses and all but one of the elephants have perished, and yet the survivors march on. Even before the first battle, Romans see Hannibal as a potent threat.
They never had to face a fiercer or more warlike foe. Carthage had long been an enemy of Rome, and they were bringing with them countless Spaniards, already battle-hungry, and would soon be raising Gauls with their insatiable appetite for blood. War was coming, and it would be fought in Italy in defense of the walls of Rome. Living.
The Roman Senate raised 6 new legions, more than 30,000 men. The Second Punic War was begun. This time the deciding factor wouldn't be manpower, but strategy. Most Roman commanders were political appointees with little battlefield experience, no match for a military genius like Hannibal.
Hannibal had a spark. I mean, he had many things that made him a great leader. I mean, he knew how to motivate troops, he knew how to innovate on the battlefield, he knew how to make the optimum use of the tools at his command. But in addition to that, he had that spark. He had the ability to read an enemy and find that one maneuver that would cause the enemy to collapse.
In battle after battle, Hannibal humiliated the Roman legions. The most devastating defeat was the Battle of Cannae. Here, Hannibal, though badly outnumbered, managed to surround the Romans and slaughtered them. 50,000 Romans, more than half the entire Roman military, killed in the worst defeat Rome ever suffered. At last, Rome saw Hannibal for what he was, the first true threat to her survival. For 15 long years, the war against Hannibal dragged on, and large areas of southern Italy defected to him. Hannibal never lost a single battle, and many wondered how long it would be before he attacked the city of Rome.
It was widely expected, of course, that he would take the city, but Rome was heavily fortified. Hannibal seems to have not had proper siege equipment. No matter how many armies of the Romans and their allies Hannibal could defeat, the Romans were always able to raise new armies, to put new armies into the field. And ultimately, Hannibal failed to take the city.
And yet the tide didn't turn against Hannibal until the Senate called up a military leader in the same league with the legendary Carthaginian. Publius Cornelius Scipio had the cunning and the charisma to match the so-called Scourge of Rome. The son of a general and a survivor of the Battle of Cannae, the young Scipio studied Hannibal's tactics closely. Then in 204 BC, rather than confront Hannibal in Italy, Scipio had a brilliant but risky plan, an end run. He sailed to Africa and invaded the empire of Carthage. Carthage was forced to respond, recalling Hannibal from his 17-year torment of Italy. It was the moment of truth. Scipio and Hannibal would fight a single battle to decide the Second Punic War, the Battle of Zama. The two armies gathered forces in the countryside of what is now central Tunisia. Outside the ancient city of Zama, Scipio confronted his arch-rival, Hannibal. It's believed the two men met face to face just before the ultimate battle in an attempt to make peace. Scipio refused Hannibal's terms, saying to his rival, "Prepare for war, since evidently you have found peace intolerable." The two sides were well matched, with about 34,000 men each, but there were crucial differences. Hannibal had been resupplied with 80 of his dreaded elephants, but Scipio had drilled his troops in new tactics for dealing with the great beasts. The Roman troops would form long corridors to funnel the charging elephants away from the front lines where they do the most damage. Scipio also had the support of thousands of local Numidian cavalry who defected from Hannibal. Renowned as the best cavalry in the world, the horsemen added to Scipio's edge. Scipio finally and soundly defeated Hannibal at Zama. Carthage was crippled. Carthage was forced to hand over all but 10 of her warships, all her elephants, and a treasure so great it would take 20 years to pay. The once great empire was impoverished and stripped of all power. Hannibal escaped from the Battle of Zama. For a time, he tried to revive his waning Carthage, but eventually fled into exile in Greece. And though the aging warrior no longer posed any threat, Rome still pursued him, determined to capture the famous scourge. Ultimately, Hannibal denied her the pleasure.
Let us free the Roman people of their long-standing anxiety, seeing that they find it tedious to wait for an old man's death. It is no magnificent victory to defeat a man unarmed and betrayed.
With that, Hannibal put a drink of poison to his lips and drained his cup. But even Hannibal's suicide was not victory enough. After so many years of war, Rome still saw Carthage as an enemy and could not abide her survival in any form. In 146 BC, Rome destroyed the African Empire once and for all in the final Punic War, slaughtering 500,000 people. The pearl of the Mediterranean is ground into dust. Carthage is no more. Rome now controlled the entire Mediterranean, along with parts of Spain, southern Gaul, and the Italian peninsula. At the same time, Rome's power was spreading eastward. In all, Roman armies held more than 250,000 square miles. In 3 centuries, a small backwater city had become a dominant world power. In the past 50 years alone, she more than tripled her domain. Her military was the most successful fighting force the world had ever known. No power on earth could truly threaten her, and every nation in her reach had reason to fear. But success wasn't all it's cracked up to be. More than a century after the wars against Carthage began, Rome was left drained, both financially and emotionally. War-weary Romans had lost hundreds of thousands of sons to bloody battles in faraway lands. Surviving soldiers had been fighting so long, they barely remembered their homes. One thing became clear. A non-professional citizen army was no longer adequate for an empire the size of Rome's. It would fall largely to one man to professionalize the Roman military, a general and politician named Gaius Marius. Marius saw the need for far-reaching changes in the structure of the Roman army. To be a soldier would now be a career in itself, not merely a sideline for landed citizens. Marius recruited even the poorest Romans into the legions and issued them standardized equipment, making them the best outfitted soldiers in the ancient world. Including weapons, a soldier carried at least 80 pounds on his back, earning troops of this era the nickname Marius's Mules. Rome's first true professional soldiers were even more fit and better disciplined than earlier armies. But the biggest change of all, this new class of warrior had a special relationship with its commander. When they became veterans, Marius would personally see to it that his men received a grant of land, often in recently conquered territories. In the end, this was more than a generous perk for poor soldiers with no farms to return to. In fact, it was revolutionary. Suddenly, a soldier's first loyalty was to the general who recruited him and took care of him in old age, and not to the state.
For the first time, the soldier looked to the general, not only for allegiance, but for pay, for retirement benefits, if you will. And then over time, then the army began to dominate the state rather than the state dominating the army. And that's the terrible legacy of Marius.
Powerful generals now controlled their own private armies. Soon, they would use them however they saw fit, even against Rome herself.